Chapter 1. I'll go to the soirees, I'll dance at the balls, but I will go as a man. What? Poor Penelope blanched, looking to be on the verge of a fainting spell. You misunderstood me entirely, exclaimed Marie. Oh, it would be fun, but how? Excellent question, murmured Caroline. You will all be there with me. Father will not be at every event to accompany me, since I have 3 chaperones. The rest is a matter of disguise, like the time I pretended to be the stable hand so that I could sneak to your house unescorted. Caroline leaned forward. Aren't you forgetting London is different? Here in the country, you're freer to determine our chaperones. In London society, you must have a matron or elder family someone or other to escort you. Father will accept you as my escorts if he thinks that's the way it is done. I'll make a point of convincing him. I must make this work. Esther stared at the designs on the Aubusson carpet, already dreaming up her words to her father. I'll help with the disguise, Marie offered. You're going to need some more convincing as a young lord than as a dirty stable hand. A very young lord, Caroline stressed, examining her form with a critical eye. I shall go to the men's clubs as well. How else to better know the mind of a man, especially if one is expected to wed the dreadful creature? What? Penelope leapt to her feet, fidgeting her fingers along the neckline of her day dress in an unconscious habit which proclaimed her distress to the other 3 women. To masquerade in a full ballroom and hide in the shadows is a risk, but to venture into a men's realm is a different undertaking altogether. I must. Esther heard the desperation in her own voice. She did not want to wed. She did not want to be required to wait on the irrational whims of a husband or be treated like an empty vessel with no more purpose but to nod and to agree. She had all she required in managing her father's estates with a free hand and living a quiet life in the country. Marriage? She'd rather be a serf. Penelope frowned. I suppose you could be my brother, viewing the prospects, but I don't like your scheme, and I'll disown you if you embarrass me. Caroline grinned. Esther squealed, embracing the reluctant Penelope, causing Penelope to cover her ears. Footsteps sounded without. All 4 women turned. The library door swung open, and Esther's father, the Marquis Richmond, strode into the room, still reading a missive. A frown furrowed his brow. Esther cleared her throat. Good day, ladies. Without stopping, Richmond's heavy tread continued to his desk, where he dropped to his leather wing-back chair. Good day, father. The ladies have agreed to join me in London for the season. The Marquis glanced up, distracted. Good. You're welcome to come. Thank you, my lord, Caroline responded. Penelope and Marie murmured their thanks as well. Esther winked at her friends. Why do we not retire to the salon and leave my father to his business, shall we? He's been most distracted of late. I'll warrant father won't even notice us in London. Esther called back over her shoulder. Isn't that right, father? I may be preoccupied, daughter, but I always have time to consider your prospects, he returned with a slight smile. I have particular interest in Mr. Welby. You must keep in mind to encourage his suit. He laid the missive flat on his desk and preoccupied himself with the response. Esther rolled her eyes. Of course, father. Esther ushered her friends out the door to the salon. Once in the hall, Caroline asked, How did Mr. Welby become an issue? You said you had no information on him. Did he present an offer to your father? Perhaps he's a secret admirer who last saw you as a child, and is certain, as a woman, you are the epitome of his wifely desires, sighed Marie. Marie, scoffed Penelope, you're such a romantic. I'm sure he must know her through her father's investments or dealings in London. Penelope entered the salon behind the others. Such speculation. I don't know why or how Mr. Welby knows of me, but he does. It matters not. He may have heard of my dowry, and may not concern himself with beauty or romantic notions. I'll wager he is vastly in debt and desperate for an heir. Is he handsome, do you think? Esther smiled at Marie's fancifulness. Marie often dreamed of handsome lords, wealthy estates, and true love. Esther patted Marie's hand. We will know soon enough. We'll be off to London in a fortnight. It will be grand to have you with me. We will all have a season together. Only you will be a man. Penelope pursed her lips. It is fortunate my brother Nicholas is away on the continent. He'd be most unhappy knowing he had to grow effeminate for a season. Caroline looked to Esther in warning. My brother will be among us. We'll have to make sure you do not meet up in the same circles with Marcus. Esther rolled her eyes. Every aspect should be considered. Penelope, you may have to borrow some of your brother's wardrobe for me. What a grand scam this will be. I can hardly wait. I think you're overestimating yourself. Nicholas is twice your size. Though, Penelope paused, considering Esther again, you may be tall enough and the right size for some of his earlier garments. Marie screwed up her face with disgust. Penelope, really? You cannot expect her to try to cut a swath through high society using outdated boy clothing. Esther, surely you have some pin money you can use? Perhaps you can use some of the money your father is allowing for your first season on new clothing. You'll be discovered. If you go for a fitting, the tailor will not be unaware of your gender, Carolyn spoke in quiet consideration. You're right, of course. Esther slumped against the sofa arm. She trailed lazy fingers over a bold embroidered rose and down the stem. The tickle of heavy thread against her fingertips made for a pleasant distraction. Marie tilted her head as she considered the toe of her pink satin slipper peeping from beneath her matching day gown. Penelope's brow furrowed. Carolyn drummed her fingers on the opposite sofa arm. We can all sew. I suppose we can still use Nicholas's old things and tailor them ourselves. Penelope offered the last in little more than an embarrassed whisper. Esther sat forward with interest. Penelope blushed. And I can make sure new Nicholas is de rigueur, put forth Marie. A spark of hope thrilled through Esther's chest. Then it's settled? Esther waited for any opposition. When none was offered, she asked, Shall we meet at Carolyn's over the next days to prepare a wardrobe fit for young Nicholas? We shall do it then, Carolyn responded. You, Esther, will have to practice your speech if you're to be passable. Esther leapt to her feet and hugged herself to contain her excitement. Carolyn grinned. You will also have to practice your movements. I doubt Nicholas has ever giggled like a girl fresh from the nursery, nor hugged himself with such enthusiasm. All four women laughed at the image. Carolyn continued, If he is anything remotely like my brother, Nicholas would be aghast at such feminine displays in a worldly man. No Corinthian would dare show more emotion than a single raised brow. Esther schooled her features, cleared her throat in what she deemed a masculine manner, shot each one of her friends a look of bored disdain, and delicately arched her right brow. Nicely done, congratulated Marie. Even Marcus would be impressed with your display of arrogance. Carolyn nodded. And you may get a chance to try it out on him. I wouldn't mind a chance, Marie sighed. A look of alarm crossed Carolyn's features. My brother had better never meet up with Esther because he is sure to recognize her from the first. If you do see him coming, she remarked, turning to Esther, flee in the opposite direction. If we are found out, it will be the end of your charade and the end of your reputation among the ton. Esther flipped her wrist, unconcerned with Carolyn's warning. He hasn't seen me since we were 4 in the nursery together, and he was home for holidays from university. I doubt he would recognize me in the least. Carolyn snorted. Again you underestimate yourself. He has seen you in breeches before when you leapt upon his mount and sped away with a bag full of investment papers, or did you forget he hunted you down on my mare? I seem to remember you draped across his saddle and hauled before your father by the ear. That was years ago. I was mere 10 years old at the time, and how was I to know he was in the middle of transferring to a new financial advisor? Esther protested. My hair was rumpled and my face was smudged. I'm a woman of consequence now, and several years older than our last meeting. You will still be wearing breeches, Carolyn pointed out. Penelope snickered. At least with Esther as a man, I will be permitted free access to associate with him. I've grown up, too. Do you think he will notice? Marie asked, wistful. Carolyn shook her head. It would not be wise for you either. If he sees you, it will take him less time to discern Esther's identity than the blink of an eye. She is right, Marie. And what does my being dressed as a man have anything to do with you associating with Marcus? You are beautiful is why. If I stand beside you, what man will look at me? Marie, the youngest of their group, pouted. Esther threw back her head and laughed. She was certain if she stood naked before Marcus, he would brush her away like an annoying fly in order to reach the fair Marie. Marie's curling golden locks sparkled in the sunlight. Her petite frame made men feel powerful and protective. Her prominent clear blue eyes spoke of innocent mischief. Esther knew her own dark locks and dull green eyes were of no comparison. Next to Marie, Esther towered like a slender giant over her smaller friend. Marie, you are ignorant of your own effect on men. Why, I vow I saw our footman walk into the carriage wheel after you alighted. Penelope and Carolyn nodded, smiling. Esther continued, Still you have no need to worry. The last I remember, and forgive me for saying so, Carolyn, Marcus, our esteemed Earl of Rochester, was a scowl-faced old man who had more concerns with his wealth than with pleasantries. Marie and Penelope exchanged looks. Esther, that was almost 10 years ago. Your perceptions are those of a little girl to a man home from university trying to prove himself, Penelope said. I saw him 2 years ago. My heart has not recovered, sighed Marie. His care for investments has made him much respected and afforded him considerable wealth. And, Carolyn added, he cares a great deal for pleasantries. You misjudge him harshly. Carolyn swatted her tea napkin at Esther. What do I care anyway? Esther chided. My father is attempting to marry me off to Mr. Welby. It's his character which concerns me at the moment. I suppose, Esther sighed, I will make peace with Marcus some day, but in the meantime I need to know what about my intended. Marcus is a man of business. Would it not be wise to ask him about Mr. Welby? Perhaps Marcus shares a financial commonality with Mr. Welby, Penelope noted. I may need to make peace much sooner than I thought, Esther murmured. That will be quite a feat, said Marie. Didn't you set fire to all his cravats before he spanked your back end for stealing a pasty from the kitchen? Yes, Esther blushed. But he was acting superior, and it irked me when his cravat never wrinkled through the entire episode. Besides, I was hungry. Cook wouldn't have minded, and I didn't know the pasties were filled with tart apples and cream for Father's birthday. True, but what about that time you told all of his visiting friends his favorite pastime was galloping about in the nursery in his shirt sleeves and whooping as loud as he could, reminded Carolyn. Or the time you stole down to the pond while he was swimming and took all his clothes back to the estate just before my musicale. He was left trying to sneak in unnoticed, but you made sure nosy Lady Haversham saw him through the garden windows. Marie and Penelope snickered in memory. Esther squirmed. Well, he did like galloping in the nursery when he was a child, and Lady Haversham saw him of her own accord. You neglected to inform his friends of the minor technicality of age, and I seem to remember you pointing out the windows and saying something like, Oh my, Lady Haversham, I do believe I see something behind those bushes. Can you quite make out what it is? Marie, hush before you tell all my secrets. I understand your point. I have a lot of making up to do with Marcus. You are assuming, Carolyn noted. He will allow you the opportunity. You may have to let me do the asking. I think he is more apt to turn you out on your ear than allow you entrance into his townhouse. I'll come with you, Carolyn, offered Marie. Carolyn cocked the Rochester eyebrow at her. Esther smirked. Then you could say you're visiting to discuss one of Penelope's suitors. Don't say that, Penelope all but shouted. I don't have any suitors yet. Good. Then it will spread the word that you're at least amenable to the prospect. Marie ducked her head before Penelope saw the twinkle in her eyes. But what if Mr. Welby found out that I thought he was my suitor? Frantic, Penelope turned to Esther. I would be mortified that he would think me so assuming. You know nothing of this man. Why care what he thinks? Esther said, sharing Marie's penchant for teasing. I care. It's out of character for me to be so brash. Can we not say that it's for a possible suitor of Marie's? At least that would be more believable. She turned pleading eyes on Marie. At least you will know if he is interested in you if he appears jealous. I like that idea, proclaimed Marie. You would, agreed Esther. He's just my brother, Carolyn said, shaking her head at Marie's blatant interest. I still say you cannot meet up with Marcus, Esther. I will find out as much as I can about Mr. Welby. I will explain I'm in town with you for the season when he asks. We have enough deception. It would be easier to keep our story straight if there's less to hide. It's also a better explanation for why you will be staying in my townhouse and not your parents' home. Just because he cannot see me in disguise does not mean he cannot know I'm in town somewhere. End of Chapter 1. To purchase Marriage Mart by Kelly Kirch, please visit www.resplendencepublishing.com